No one can escape Death's plan. After a 14-year break, Final Destination is back with its 6th entry, Bloodlines. Here's what you need to know if you're going in cold. In most other horror movies where unwitting victims get taken out one by one, there's a monster to run away from. Your Freddys, Jasons, Michael Myers, Jigsaws, Leatherfaces, the list goes on. Not so in Final Destination. The antagonist of all the films is an incorporeal and never-seen cosmic force, death itself. Each film follows essentially the same formula. A lead character has a premonition of some catastrophic event that will lead to the deaths of lots of people, including themselves. That character then tells others about their vision, saving some lives in the process. But because all those characters were meant to die, death comes after them one by one, often killing them in complex, Rube Goldberg-style ways that appear to be accidents. The characters usually get some explanation that this is what's going on, often from Tony Todd's character, William Bloodworth, who has been depicted as both a coroner and a mortician.
You can't cheat death. There are no escapes.
So, what could anyone possibly do to thwart the plans of essentially a godlike entity? Well, let's dig into how the characters in the series try to pull off the seemingly impossible. Final Destination 5 is a very rare thing, a prequel that doesn't immediately tell you that it's a prequel. While released in 2011, it takes place in late 1999 and early 2000, the year that the first Final Destination film is set. This isn't instantly apparent, but there are clues scattered throughout the film that it's taking place earlier. Characters use flip phones instead of smartphones. There are references to late 90s pop culture, like singer Lisa Loeb and the movie The Sixth Sense.
I see dead people.
And a few blink-and-you'll-miss-it shots actually reveal what year it is. On first viewing, though, a lot of viewers won't even notice until the very end that the events of FD5 are taking place before and during those of the first movie. Everything ends up literally crashing together by the end, however. With Bloodlines seeming to be aiming to tie together the mythology of all the films, it's worth noting how closely connected the first and fifth ones are. The catastrophe that kicks off Final Destination 5 is the collapse of the North Bay Bridge in upstate New York. Among the vehicles on that bridge is a bus taking many of the employees of Presage Paper on their company retreat. One of those employees, Sam Lawton, who is also an aspiring chef, sees a vision of what's about to happen. Everyone on the bus, except for his ex-girlfriend Molly, is killed. Sam convinces 6 of his co-workers to get off the bus to escape the disaster. In what then proceeds like a dark parody of The Office, series alum David Koechner is even in the cast as the egotistical branch manager. The people who survive start dying in the order they were meant to die in the bridge collapse. One dies in a gymnastics accident, another's head gets crushed during a massage session that goes very poorly. Yet another dies while trying to get LASIK surgery. The remaining survivors encounter Bloodworth, who tells them the only way to avoid Death's plan for the rest of them is to kill someone else.
You take their spot in the realm of the living, all the days and years that they've yet to live.
Nathan, a survivor who works in Presage's factory, seemingly pulls this off when an angry co-worker, Roy, gets impaled on the hook that was meant for him. After learning about this, another survivor, Peter, tries to shoot Molly and kill her, taking her remaining years. Peter fails at that, but does kill an FBI agent who arrives after hearing the gunshots. Sam then impales Peter on a meat spit, seemingly taking the years Peter took from the agent. Sam spends much of Final Destination 5 deciding whether he should take an apprenticeship at a restaurant in Paris. When Molly finally agrees to go along with him, he commits to it. A few weeks after Peter's death, with both Sam and Molly certain that they've escaped death, they board a flight to Paris, Volee Airlines Flight 180. Some passengers leave before takeoff, and the flight attendant tells Sam that one of them had a panic attack after experiencing a vision. Sam immediately knows what that means, but by that point, the plane is taken off, and he can't escape. Both he and Molly are killed as the plane explodes. Meanwhile, Nathan attends a memorial for Roy at a bar. A co-worker there tells him that Roy had an enlarged blood vessel in his brain that could have burst at any moment.
They said he'd be dead any day now.
Any day.
Almost instantly, a piece of landing gear from Flight 180 crashes through the ceiling of the bar, crushing Nathan. Any fans of the series recognize exactly what flight Sam and Molly were on in Final Destination 5. It's the same flight to Paris that a group of unlucky Mount Abraham High School students board for a class trip in 2000's Final Destination. The passenger who has the panic attack is Alex Browning, as a result of a premonition of the plane exploding. He, 5 classmates, and 1 teacher are all taken off the plane, which then takes off and promptly explodes as the vision predicted. A little over a month later, Alex has become obsessed with figuring out what caused the plane explosion. vision. He also continues to see signs of impending doom, like the name of his friend Todd, who gets strangled to death by a clothesline in his bathroom. Alex and another survivor, Clea Rivers, go to the funeral home where Todd is being embalmed and encounter Bloodworth. He doesn't tell them about the killing other people thing, but he does explain,
Your friend's departure shows that death has a new design for all of you.
After another classmate, Terry, is killed when she's hit by a bus, Alex deduces that the survivors are dying in the order that they would have died on the plane. Alex attempts to stop the next death, specifically of Miss Luton, the teacher who got off the plane. But his odd behavior outside her house leads her to call the FBI to bring him in for questioning. He tries to rush back to save her, but she gets impaled with a knife in her kitchen. Then her house explodes, nearly killing Alex too. The remaining survivors, Alex, Clea, Carter, and Billy, meet to try to figure out what to do next. After learning he's next in the order, Carter stops his car on some train tracks to take control of his death. Alex saves him, seemingly preventing Carter's planned death. Billy, who's after Carter in the order, then dies when the train kicks up some shrapnel, decapitating him. Thinking he's next, Alex holds up in a remote cabin, but he then remembers switching seats on the plane, meaning that Clea is next. He rushes to save her as she's trapped in her car, with a downed power line threatening to ignite flammable liquid. Alex manages to rescue Clea by grabbing the cable. He's badly electrocuted in the process, but also survives. 6 months later, Clea, Carter, and Alex sit at a cafe in Paris. Right after Alex brings up that no one ever intervened to stop his death, a bus sideswipes a pole that then knocks a neon sign off the roof. The sign swings down toward Alex, but Carter pushes him out of the way. Then the sign swings back and hits Carter, killing him. The last scene of Final Destination shows that Clea and Alex have kindled up a romance, but it doesn't last very long. A shot of an online news article in Final Destination 2 reveals that Alex dies between movies and off-screen in what's described as an apparent freak accident involving a falling brick. The article also states that Alex hadn't left his home for 3 months. Another article shown a few scenes later states that Clea commits herself to a mental institution immediately after Alex's death. Devon Sawa, who played Alex, was reportedly unable to return for the sequel due to scheduling conflicts, so the decision was made to write him out. However, Sawa has repeatedly expressed interest in returning to the franchise at some point, even though Alex is all by indications dead. It's also worth mentioning that Alex actually does die in the original ending of Final Destination, which was heavily reworked after test audiences complained. In that ending, Alex is killed when he grabs the electrical cable. Clea and Alex also conceive a child before he dies. The creation of a new life saves both Clea and Carter from death. That scrapped idea then pops up again in the following film. Final Destination 2 was released in 2003, but it's set in 2001, only around a year after the events of the first movie. It comes out of the gate pretty hard. While driving a group of friends to spring break in Daytona Beach, Kimberly Corman has a premonition of a massive car crash on the highway, initially caused by logs falling off of the back of a truck. A log goes through the windshield of a New York State trooper, Thomas Burke, killing him. A motorcyclist is crushed by his own bike. Numerous cars explode, and Kimberly's group is killed when a flaming truck plows into their SUV, which has flipped over. One driver who notably doesn't die in the vision is a pregnant woman, Isabella. The premonition ends, and it's revealed that Kimberly and her friends are still waiting on the on-ramp to the highway, Route 23. Kimberly swings her SUV around to block access to the highway, preventing 7 of the other victims from merging onto the road. Burke tries to get her to move, but she gets out of her car, insisting that an accident is going to happen.
Is there any way that we could drive around? I have a delivery.
You need to get back into your vehicles. Just move now.
The log truck then drives by, and the accident does happen as predicted. In a subversion of expectations, a truck hauling cars slams into the SUV with Kimberly's friends still inside as Burke pulls Kimberly away. They were the last to die in the vision, but the first survivors to go as death puts its plan into action. By Final Destination 2, the world knows all about the deaths of all the survivors of Flight 180, with many referring to the phenomenon as a curse. Both Kimberly and the motorcyclist Eugene tell the others about it and how the same thing might be happening to them.
You know, some people even said that death itself was stalking them, hunting each one down.
But even Eugene himself doesn't believe it at first. The death of another person who avoided the crash, Evan, in a very complex accident at his apartment involving spaghetti, a flaming stovetop, and a fire escape ladder, leads Kimberly to track down Clea at the mental institution. Clea, who checked in to protect herself from death, refuses to help her, other than telling her to watch out for death signs. Kimberly sees one: pigeons. It takes the death of another survivor, a teenage boy named Tim, who gets crushed under a huge glass panel outside his dentist's office after he chases after some pigeons to get invite Clea to join in with what's left of the group as they gather in an apartment. Their hope is that being together will give them a chance to avoid death, giving them the chance to relay the signs they keep seeing quickly enough to save each other. That plan falls apart almost immediately though, even though one of the survivors sees a shadow of Hooks and Burke relays a warning about their danger to Tim's mom, Nora. She still dies in the building's elevator. In fact, it's the warning that does her in. She freaks out when she connects the warning to a man carrying a box of prosthetic limbs, tries to escape the elevator, and gets her head crushed in the door. Just before that calamitous meeting, Kimberly, Burke, and Clea go visit Bloodsworth once again. This time he's got yet another piece of advice for people looking to avoid death's design.
Only new life can defeat death.
This leads the survivors to believe that the key to saving themselves is to make sure Isabella gives birth. What's left of the group piles into an SUV to ensure Isabella has her baby. They all tell stories about how they've escaped death before, realizing that all those events were somehow tied to the survivors of Flight 180. They also note that death is going in reverse order this time. Clea theorizes it has to do with the ripple effects of Flight 180. One of the SUV's tires explodes, running them off the road and sending them crashing into a bundle of pipes. An ambulance arrives to take the badly injured Eugene to the hospital. The driver, Kat, is killed when her airbag deploys, shoving her head into a pipe. Another survivor, Rory, gets sliced to pieces by a flying barbed wire fence after a news van explodes. Isabella has her baby, but since she wasn't actually meant to die in the crash, it doesn't stop death. Eugene and Clea are both killed when a spark ignites, leaking oxygen in his hospital room, causing an explosion. So Kimberly develops a new theory that to save Burke, she has to die. She steals an ambulance and drives it into a lake. Burke rescues her and she's resuscitated by a doctor. They live and go to a celebratory cookout at the farm where their SUV crashed. But death's not done yet. A teenager Rory saved from being hit by a news van dies when the grill explodes. Released and set in 2006, Final Destination 3 kicks off the carnage with a roller coaster crash. To celebrate their graduation from high school in McKinley, Pennsylvania, Wendy Christensen, her best friend Carrie, and their boyfriends Jason and Kevin go to an amusement park along with many of their classmates. They got on the roller coaster Devil's Flight, the mascot for which is voiced by Tony Todd.
This is the beginning of the end.
Wendy sees a vision of the coaster's hydraulics failing and the wheels rolling over a camcorder that's fallen onto the track, causing it to derail and kill everyone on board. The premonition ends, and Wendy, who had insisted on sitting in the back, screams to be let off the ride before it departs. She, Kevin, Wendy's sister Julie, and quite a few more passengers seated at the rear of the coaster are let off. The people in the front of the train, including Wendy's boyfriend Jason and Kevin's girlfriend Carrie, are sent off on the ride and die when it crashes. The next day at school, Wendy tells Kevin she won't be attending graduation. Kevin tells her about Flight 180 and says someone may have to intervene to stop their deaths. Two other survivors, Ashley and Ashlyn, invite Wendy to their tanning salon, hoping to cheer her up. Wendy turns them down, and not long after that, both Ashley and Ashlyn are burned to death in their tanning beds. After Ashley and Ashlyn's funeral, Wendy tells Kevin that not only does she think death is coming for the survivors of the roller coaster accident in the order they were meant to die, but that she has also been noticing clues in the digital photos she took at the amusement park. She's been seeing omens of impending death in historical photos too, including pictures of Abraham Lincoln before his assassination and of the Twin Towers before the September 11, 2001 attacks.
The photographic plate was broken, causing a line that can't be removed. Exactly where he was shot.
The two of them continue to discuss things as they go to a fast food drive-thru window. A truck on top of a nearby hill loses control and starts careening toward them. Wendy and Kevin escape Kevin's car in time, but the man in the car in front of them gets repeatedly sliced through the top of the head with a car's engine's fan. That man is revealed to be Frankie Cheeks, another survivor of the Devil's Flight crash. Wendy and Kevin look through the photos and find a shot of Frankie's head next to a fan. They use the other photos to determine who is likely next, a football player named Lewis. They find Lewis working out with his teammates in the school weight room. After he shrugs off their warnings, Lewis is killed after a pair of swords come unattached from the wall, severing the cables on the weight machine he's using. When he does another rep, the weights fall and crush his head. Wendy and Kevin then try to warn the next victims, Ian and Erin, who work the after-hours shift at a home improvement store. They also laugh off the warning, but Wendy, having studied the photos, manages to save Ian from being impaled by wooden stakes. Unfortunately, Erin, Ian's girlfriend, is not so lucky. She's killed after the falling stakes knock her back into a nail gun, which then fires repeatedly through her head. More accidents happen at a fair celebrating the 300th anniversary of the town of McKinley. Wendy's sister Julie nearly dies when a horse gets loose and she gets caught in the rope dragging behind it. Kevin cuts the rope and saves her from being dragged into a harrow. Julie's friend Perry, who was sitting next to her on the roller coaster, gets impaled with a flagpole. Kevin is then nearly burned to death, but Wendy pulls him out of the way of the flames. Ian, who blames Wendy for Erin's death and believes he's safe because his life was saved, arrives and tries to close the loop with Wendy's death. Wendy remembers that she was wearing a McKinley high school shirt the night of the roller coaster crash, and McKinley also happens to be Ian's last name.
Oh, no way. Do I cause your death?
An array of fireworks launchers tips over and fires toward Wendy, Kevin, and Julie, but they duck out of the way. The firework instead hits a cherry picker, which collapses onto Ian, crushing him. 5 months later, Wendy's on a subway train where she notices lots of morbid signs, including stops named after famous presidential assassins. There's also a McKinley stop, and the conductor is once again voiced by Todd. She just happens to meet Kevin and Julie on the train, and then another premonition begins. The train gets derailed when a rat eating a candy bar switches the tracks. Both Julie and Kevin are killed in the crash. Wendy is thrown from the crash, but then hit by an oncoming train. After her vision, Wendy does all she can to stop the accident, but realizes she's trapped. Despite the title, 2009's The Final Destination is not a reboot of the series, but it was intended at the time to be the last one. The incident in this one is a crash at a racetrack, McKinley Speedway. It's unclear whether the speedway is in the town from Final Destination 3. The setting of The Final Destination is pretty vague. College student Nick O'Bannon takes in a race with his girlfriend Laurie, and their friends Hunt and Janet, who are exes. After Laurie and Janet complain about how they could have gone to a movie instead, Nick has a vision of a crash sending debris, including entire race cars, into the crowd. That sets off a cascade of destruction that culminates in the building partially collapsing, killing dozens of people.
That's the car that's gonna crash. We have to get out of here.
After his premonition, Nick warns the people around him. Quite a few leave the stands, including a security guard named George. As they all argue outside, the crash happens and the speedway collapses as Nick foresaw. One woman who actually got out, Nadia, still gets crushed by a flying tire anyway. As before, death begins to come for all the people Nick saved. A man named Carter, but identified in the credits as simply racist, attempts to burn a cross on George's lawn. He gets set on fire and dragged to death behind his tow truck in the process.
You remember that redneck from the racetrack? He's dead.
There's a lot of build-up to the death of another survivor, Samantha. After a perilous but ultimately safe beauty salon visit, a lawnmower shoots a rock through her head. Nick sees omens of both of these deaths, which leads him and Laurie to research the events of the previous films. They can't convince Hunt and Janet that death is coming for them all, but they do manage to get George on their side. The three of them try to warn a mechanic named Andy, who they've determined is the next to die. They nearly get him to believe them, but he's then hit by a flying oxygen tank and sliced to pieces by a chain-link fence. Nick then sees several signs and visions that lead him to the conclusion that both Hunt and Janet will die in water-related accidents. While George and Laurie find a way to keep Janet from being killed in a car wash, Nick is unable to save Hunt from his fate. He gets stuck on a drain at the bottom of a pool, and it sucks out his internal organs. Demoralized by all that's happened, George attempts to kill himself in several ways, none of which work because he's not next in the order. Laurie and Nick stop him, telling him that Janet being saved has broken the chain. Thinking they're safe, Laurie and Janet go to the movie they wanted to see to begin with. Meanwhile, George and Nick realize there's another survivor who is found in the speedway wreckage. They try to reach him at the hospital, but he's crushed by a falling bathtub. As Nick and George leave, George gets hit by an ambulance and killed. Nick then has a premonition where he sees the mall movie theater where Laurie and Janet are exploding. Janet is killed by flying shrapnel, and Laurie is crushed in an escalator while trying to escape. After Nick's vision, he rushes to the mall to save Laurie and Janet. He finds the source of the explosion and puts out the fire, preventing it from happening. Stopping the explosion makes Nick something of a local hero. He even gets recognized when he meets Laurie and Janet at a coffee shop.
You saved a lot of lives, man.
I was just at the right place at the right time.
The three of them take a seat by a large window. Nick sees reminders of the deaths in the movie up to that point, and wonders whether the mall explosion was really what was meant to kill him. Just then, a falling platform causes a truck to swerve off the road and into the coffee shop, killing all three. While he doesn't appear in The Final Destination, Tony Todd's William Bloodworth has at least some presence in all the other films, even if it's just as a voice in Final Destination 3. Bloodworth also promises to be a big part of Bloodlines.
Good luck.
Todd died in November 2024, so Bloodlines will be one of his last roles to hit the screen. It will definitely be his last in the Final Destination franchise. Given that Bloodworth is the only franchise character who appears more than twice, and the only other one who achieved that was Ali Larter's Clear Rivers, we're definitely holding out hope that we'll get some sense of his connection to the cosmic force driving the events of these movies. Yes, Bloodworth's answers seem to be different in every movie, but considering that he's the only character with any answers at all, we're curious how he arrived at them. Does he work for death? Is he part of some other force opposing it? Is he simply cursed with knowledge? Is he just making all this up? Maybe we'll find out. Though the songs change between movies, one connecting thread between all the Final Destination films is a use of music to signify an impending calamity. In the first film, the song Rocky Mountain High by John Denver is used several times just before a character dies. Denver's real death was in a 1997 plane crash, though it was on a small private plane, not a commercial flight.
During a plane crash?
Another song that precedes a death in Final Destination is Into the Void by 9 Inch Nails, which includes the phrase Final Destination in the lyrics. Rocky Mountain High also comes back in Final Destination 2, but only once as elevator music. In Final Destination 5, death also largely sticks to one song, Dust in the Wind by Kansas. That one's pretty on the nose, but it also alludes to the bridge collapse being caused by high winds. The other movies use multiple songs, but at least one in each refers directly to the opening disaster. Final Destination 2 uses Highway to Hell by AC/DC, Love Roller Coaster by the Ohio Players, which long was the basis of a false urban legend about containing a real death scream, is in the third movie, and the Final Destination uses Devour by Shinedown, which has lyrics that could be interpreted as referring to a crash at a racetrack. Besides Tony Todd and the music, there are a few other elements that connect the films and the franchise. Most importantly, the numbers. The digits of Flight 180 appear all over the place throughout the series. To name just a few places, the sign that falls at the end of the first movie is for a restaurant called Le Café Miro 81. The restaurant where Sam works in Final Destination 5 is also called Le Café Miro 81. When Kimberly blocks the on-ramp in Final Destination 2, there's a road sign that says next 180 feet. The subway train that Wendy rides at the end of Final Destination 3 is train number 081, and the section of the speedway that collapses in the Final Destination is section 180. There are several theories about the significance of the number 180, including 180 degrees being half a circle. The comic series Final Destination Spring Break ties the number, at least the 1 and the 8, to the dead man's hand. The legend goes that Wild Bill Hickok was holding a pair of aces and a pair of 8s when he was shot and killed during a poker game. The series also finds other ways to reference itself. For example, one of the race cars from the Final Destination appears in a photo near the end of Final Destination 5. A sign in the background of the Final Destination is for Clear Rivers Water. In Final Destination 2, Kimberly sees a bus from Mount Abraham High School, and the opening credits of both the 4th and 5th movies reference the most memorable deaths from the previous films. One last thing that's purely an Easter egg, many of the characters across the series share last names with prominent horror film directors, including Tobe Hooper, William Friedkin, Alfred Hitchcock, and lots more. By the time they reach 5 movies, a lot of horror film franchises can get bogged down under the weight of their lore, sometimes struggling to keep explaining every tiny aspect of the world they've built. Final Destination hasn't had that problem, opting instead to simply stick to the formula of getting some creative kills out of death coming after a group of survivors of a catastrophe. But Bloodlines looks to be taking on some of the bigger questions of the series, flashing back to the mid-20th century to depict a tragedy involving an exploding tower. Death looks to be coming for the entire family of the woman who foresaw it, Iris Campbell, who has been dodging her fate for decades.
Death is coming for our family.
We have to wonder if we'll get any clarity on what is causing the special few to have these visions, and why they're being chosen to have them. Is it some opposing force, or just death having a laugh? Beyond that, how did the survivors in Final Destination 2 ultimately make it when nobody else did, despite their best efforts? What about the other survivors of the accident, like the people who weren't in the core cast who left the speedway in the Final Destination? Why is death so obsessed with irony? While we'd love to know the answers to all these, we're doubtful they'll be addressed.